There's a certain kind of move powerful people make when the room feels chaotic. They don't rush to match the noise. They don't react to every provocation. Instead, they narrow the field. They slow the tempo. They make the situation smaller than it looks. And somehow, in the middle of confusion, they seem calm. Most people assume this calm comes from confidence or experience or sheer boldness. But throughout history, that stillness was often something else entirely. It was calculation. When people picture Roman generals, they tend to imagine spectacle. Massive legions marching in perfect formation, gleaming armor, crushing victories achieved through discipline and brute force. The story is usually told as one of superiority. Better soldiers, better weapons, better organization. That explanation is comfortable. It keeps the focus on visible strength, but it misses something quieter. Roman commanders were not just fighting armies, they were managing perception, time, terrain, and information. And in many cases, they were not overpowering their enemies, they were outthinking them. There's more going on here than most history books suggest. Take the campaigns of Gaius Julius Caesar in Gaul. He often faced coalitions larger than his own forces, tribal confederations that knew the land better, moved faster, and could outnumber Roman troops dramatically. On paper, he should have been overwhelmed. But Caesar rarely fought the army in front of him as it appeared. He reshaped it first. He forced opponents into battles before their allies fully assembled. He built fortifications not just for defense, but to provoke psychological reactions. At Alesia, he ordered walls constructed facing both outward and inward, trapping the Gallic forces inside while preparing for reinforcements outside. It wasn't a show of brute force. It was a way of controlling options. The enemy was never allowed to fight on their own terms. The same pattern appears earlier, during the long struggle against Hannibal Barca in the Second Punic War. After devastating Roman defeats at Trebia and Cannae, where thousands fell in catastrophic engagements, a different strategy emerged. Quintus Fabius Maximus avoided direct confrontation altogether. He shadowed Hannibal, disrupted supply lines, and refused battle. At the time, many Romans saw it as cowardice. In reality, it was a refusal to play the game Hannibal had mastered. Fabius understood something subtle. Hannibal's brilliance relied on forcing Rome into dramatic clashes where tactical genius could shine. So Rome removed the stage. They stretched the war. They made it logistical instead of theatrical. They changed the kind of intelligence required to win. Roman generals were not obsessed with dramatic victory. They were obsessed with reducing uncertainty. And this instinct did not come from personality. It came from context. The Roman Republic was not a stable, unified command structure. Generals answered to the Senate. Rival politicians waited in the wings. Triumphs and failures could reshape careers overnight. Annihilation and battle was not just a military disaster, it was political ruin. In that environment, risk was measured differently. A commander had to preserve his army not only to win wars, but to survive the political system at home. Caution was not weakness, it was insulation. The Roman legion itself reflected this mentality. Flexible manipular formations allowed units to rotate in and out of combat. Roads were engineered to ensure supply continuity. Camps were fortified nightly, even in friendly territory. These habits seem almost excessive, but they weren't about paranoia. They were about narrowing variables. Roman generals did not rely on heroics. They relied on systems that reduced the need for heroics. Even when they expanded into distant provinces, from Hispania to the eastern Mediterranean, the pattern repeated. Before conquest came intelligence gathering. Before engagement came negotiation. Before decisive battle came fragmentation of alliances. Divide coalitions, delay mobilization, exhaust morale, control the pace. The battlefield was often decided before the first sword was drawn. It's tempting to frame this as superior discipline or moral fortitude, but it wasn't inherently moral or immoral. It was a survival strategy shaped by the era. Other civilizations developed their own methods under different pressures. Carthage leaned into tactical brilliance. Greek city-states prized decisive clashes of citizen armies. Rome leaned into endurance and structural control. Every system produces its own form of intelligence. The Roman way happens to favor patience over spectacle.
There is a quiet paradox in this approach. By seeking control over every variable, Roman commanders reduced the chance of catastrophic defeat, but they also created a culture that depended heavily on constant expansion and constant vigilance. The same systems that insulated them from chaos required endless maintenance. Control breeds stability, but it also breeds expectation. As Rome transitioned from republic to empire, that expectation hardened. Generals who mastered these methods could accumulate immense power. The legion's loyalty shifted from the Senate to individuals. The strategy that once preserved the state began to reshape it. Outthinking armies had consequences beyond the battlefield. And this is where the pattern feels less distant. The Roman method wasn't about aggression alone. It was about shaping the environment so that opponents faced fewer good choices. Limit options, slow momentum, fragment alliances, preserve your own flexibility. It shows up in boardrooms and negotiations, and how institutions handle crises. Even in personal conflicts where one side refuses escalation and instead controls tempo. The arena changes, the principle doesn't. Human strategy hasn't evolved as dramatically as we imagine. We still admire boldness. We still mistake volume for strength, and we still underestimate the quiet work of reducing uncertainty before taking visible action. The Roman general who appeared decisive in battle had often spent weeks making that decisiveness unnecessary. That doesn't make them mythical tacticians. It makes them products of a system that rewarded foresight over flair. Understanding this shifts how you see their victories. It also shifts how you see power itself. The most effective move is often made long before anyone realizes the game has begun. There are other forgotten methods buried in the mechanics of ancient states. Ways information was controlled, alliances were engineered, and threats were neutralized without spectacle. If this reframes how you see Rome, there are more patterns waiting beneath the surface.